Nigeria is witnessing widespread protests that have captured national and international attention. Tens of thousands of people across Africa's most populous country are participating in the protests under the banner of End Bad Governance in Nigeria. Concerns are rising over the influence of Russia in the ongoing demonstrations in Nigeria. In several states, demonstrators have been spotted brandishing Russian flags. Is Russia in support of the protests going on in Nigeria? Well, we are going to find out in this video. But before we ride on, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too so you always receive updates on our latest videos. Nigeria has seen a week of nationwide protests, in which at least 13 people have lost their lives and more than 700 have been arrested. On Nigeria's Democracy Day in June, a protest about the country's cost of living crisis organized by unions and youth groups was met with silence, as only a few hundred people showed up in the capital, Abuja, as well as the country's biggest city, Lagos. Then things started to kick off in Kenya. Amid violence that claimed more than 20 lives, young Kenyans incensed at the idea of higher taxes on necessities and took over the parliament building in Nairobi. William Ruto, the president of Kenya, was compelled to rescind his financial bill and disband his government. Young people in Nigeria saw this as a way forward to pass a message to their president, Tinubu, and announced 10 days of protests across the country from August. In the face of 40% food inflation, Tinubu had accepted a minimum monthly wage of 70,000 naira, following weeks of lobbying by the unions. He met in private with his national security advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, governors of the ruling APC, traditional leaders from throughout the nation, the ministers of justice and information, and the head of the police force. In the days that followed, the military and secret police said they would take to the streets to forestall violence. Concerns are rising over the influence of Russia in the ongoing demonstrations in Nigeria. Some protesters have been seen wielding Russian flags as they demonstrate. Others have been chanting slogans such as "We are hungry," while a minority have been voicing support for Russian President Vladimir Putin. It has been said that some of these demonstrators have demanded that Moscow rescue them. Following recent military takeovers, several nations in West Africa, particularly Niger, Nigeria's neighbor, have turned their backs on the West and turned toward Russia. Note that President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria was elected in a closely contested election and took office in May 2023. Many people attribute the rapid rise in living expenses to his policies, which have caused a steep decline in satisfaction with his leadership. In his inaugural speech, he eliminated a long-standing state fuel subsidy, which increased gas prices. The move also impacted the cost of food and other necessities. Nigerians who are angry have been advised to wait by Mr. Tinubu, who is certain that his programs will succeed. He has called for a stop to the demonstrations and met with the heads of security to gauge their scope. Army Chief Christopher Musa has also said, "We are warning in clear terms that we will not accept any individual flying any foreign flag in Nigeria. That is a treasonable offense, and it will be viewed and treated as such." The Russian embassy in Nigeria has distanced itself from the protests and said that the flags were the personal choices of the demonstrators. As always, we emphasize that Russia does not interfere in the domestic affairs of foreign states, including Nigeria, it added. The northwestern states of Kaduna and Zamfara have seen a massive turnout of demonstrators. 39 persons have been taken into custody, according to Kaduna police spokesman Mansur Hassan, one of whom was a tailor who was sewing the foreign flags for the group. Nearly 40 Russian flags were seized along with a Chinese flag. Kaduna has now implemented a curfew, making it the sixth state to do so since last week, forcing millions of people to stay indoors. Nigeria's Secret Service claimed in a statement that tailors in Kano State had also been detained for making Russian flags. Some of their sponsors have also been picked. Investigation is ongoing, it said. Nigeria's defense chiefs told journalists that hoisting the Russian flags amounts to treason. Amnesty International, a human rights organization, claims that since the protests started last week, 13 people have lost their lives and accused security personnel of using excessive force against protesters. These young Nigerians are not planning on ending these protests anytime soon. Some are calling Tinubu greedy, as Unilag increased university tuition fees while simultaneously instituting a rule that forbids students from doing business in their hostels. Many Nigerians no longer have access to basic necessities, and despite Nigeria being one of the top oil exporters, mysterious fuel shortages occur every other week. This week, the price of a liter of fuel was 1,300 naira, up from 580 naira earlier in the month. In addition, the naira has continued to decline in value despite government efforts to support it with policies and coercive measures. Students especially find it difficult because many of them have trouble affording textbooks or school fees. The removal of an electricity subsidy for the highest power users in February also made matters worse. Due to their high electricity costs, some universities, which are generally big users of electricity, have been cut off from the national grid, forcing students to discover alternate ways to complete their coursework in the dark. At the University of Ilorin in Kwara State, where student dissent is prohibited, students had to write their exams without access to electricity, while students at the University of Ibadan in Oyo State took to the streets last month to express their frustrations. The intricate prerequisites for obtaining the government's tertiary education loan scheme have hindered many individuals who are close to leaving school. Incidents of destruction and looting continue to happen all around the nation. Tear gas was used by police to break up many demonstrations, including ones in Lagos and Abuja. Activists supporting the government under the slogan "Protect Nigeria" have announced that protests will go until August 15. Earlier gatherings saw little participation and occurred mainly in Lagos and Abuja. Some minor clashes were reported between rival protesters. However, curfews are in place in various locations. More curfews and other restrictions may be imposed by government representatives or governors in advance of protests, or in the case of severe local, state, or national upheaval. In the event of future protests, state capital city centers, particularly those close to governors' offices, government structures such as the National Assembly in Abuja, important roads, including highways, and the routes connecting city centers to airports are likely to be the sites of gatherings. Conflicts between protesters could arise if counter-protesters try to congregate in comparable locations. Anywhere there is a gathering, there will probably be more security and maybe localized traffic delays. This is especially true in state capital cities close to government buildings and transportation hubs. There is a greater chance of violence between opposing activists or between activists and security officers, especially if authorities forbid demonstrations and demonstrators block important highways, such as those that link airports. The Nigerian government is already under a lot of pressure from the protests to respond to the worries of its people. Social media platforms have given the demonstrations more traction, enabling activists to organize and mobilize. Tinubu continues to pledge to pay attention and resolve the complaints made by the demonstrators. The international world has been keenly monitoring the situation, even though there is no clear indication that foreign countries will directly intervene in the protests. Globally, people and organizations have expressed their support and attention for the protests. The Nigerian government's actions and the demonstrators' demands, among other things, would determine how the protests are ultimately resolved and whether or not foreign intervention is necessary. The protests have created an opportunity for dialogue between the government and the citizens. President Bola Tinubu is now acknowledging the pain and frustration driving the protests and is expressing a commitment to addressing the concerns of the people. This indicates a willingness to engage in discussions and potentially implement reforms. From all indications, Putin and Russia do not have a hand in these protests, but this does not mean that Russia is not likely to join. These Russian flags, however, do prove a point. Nigerians are seeing the support Russia is giving to Burkina Faso and believe Russia could be of assistance to them. Does this mean there is a possibility for a coup? Well, we can't make assumptions, but we are here to give you every detail about the upcoming events in Nigeria. What's your take on this? Do you believe Russia has a hand in these protests? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the New Tourist channel. Turn on notifications too so you get notified whenever we upload videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in our next video.